Welcome back to the news at 10. To the environment now, experts are worried that by 2025, every 3 metric ton of fish from the ocean will produce 1 metric ton of solid waste. With this figure, they are now advocating for measures that will ensure that the ocean waterways and the coastal lines be kept clean. Joining me on the news at 10 is the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Lagos State, Mr. Oluwatoyin Oni Saratu. I want to thank you so much indeed for coming on the news at 10. Should the global community be concerned that by 2025, for every 3 tons of fish, we have 1 ton of solid waste? How concerned should we be?
We should be very concerned. And I feel that the action should be now, if not too late. We should clean up our coastal areas regularly, not just on this day, the third Saturday of every September every year. That is set aside for the cleanup of coastal areas. I think it should be a regular thing, and that is what we hope to do. We've started that today, and regularly, once every quarter, we hope to do same.
Some people will say that this is totally inconceivable. I mean, you haven't finished with the waste on the land and you're thinking about the waste in the water. How do you respond to people who think this way?
I think it's wrong to think that. If you look at our waterways, our drainage infrastructure, what you have there is waste and not silt. Like I showed you a few minutes back, a few photographs that I had. We need to clean up our waterways. We need to clean up our drainages. And what you find there are PET bottles and other packaging materials. This could be recovered and turned into wealth.
1 ton of solid waste from fish it's huge.
It's huge.
You know, and considering that Nigeria also has territorial coastal waters,
you can also imagine how much money we can make from 1 ton of waste.
There's a good side to the story.
Yes, there is.
How so?
There are recyclables in that tonnage of waste, which we could recover and turned into other products, which we could use.
Are you supposing, like there is in advanced economies where solid waste is being turned to biofuels, that this can also be turned into biofuels?
Yes, please. Why not? What we hope to do here is ensure that we manage our waste properly, encourage material recovery, both at home and at the dump site. We want to reduce the amount of waste going to our dump sites by 50% by engaging more people in material recovery.
Does leaving the waste as it is in the water, by the coastal water side, if the waste is left there, how does it impact on the biodiversity in the ocean?
There are organisms, animals in the water, and sometimes they take this for food and they ingest it. We in turn ingest this, and it's harmful to us. So we should discourage it. We should ensure that we manage our waste properly. And we have a department in one of our agencies, which is called the Marine Waste Department. They go on a daily basis to recover some of this waste from our water bodies. We also have our drainage department when we do clean up of our drainages. But what you find there is majorly waste, especially our PET bottles. And these could be recovered and turned into wealth. We hope to strengthen this in the state government and set up recovery centers where we also generate employment and then turn some of these recovered items to the end users.
So the fish will die in the ocean if we don't clean the dirt inside?
They will. And very soon we will have fish loss, huge fish loss. And that could be loss of employment for the fishermen in the coastal areas.
On this day, the International Coastal Cleanup Day, what is the single most important element to take home from a day like this?
We want to show the public how much of waste we have dumped into our waterways and maybe into our drainage infrastructure, and create awareness so that if we'll all come together, we can make that change. I think that is what we want to propagate today. If you all come on board, make that change, then we will have a better environment.
I want to thank you so much indeed. The Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Lagos State, Mr. Oluwatoyin Onisorotu.
Thank you for having me.
Many thanks indeed for your time and your thoughts. The Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, NATI, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, has asked the federal government to amend the NATI Act to enable it implement her audit report on the extractive and oil and gas sectors of the economy. According to the Executive Secretary, if the power to implement the report of her audit are granted by an act, corruption in the sector will be reduced. The agency is also proposing for a review of her funding pattern and the composition of a governing board with a view to strengthening her operations.
We're not asking for new powers. We're just asking for provisions to be made more clearly. For example, the NAITI Act has provisions for NAITI to conduct audits, which is what we call reporting, and then it has a provisions for NAITI to disseminate the outcomes of this audit reports. But there's no provisions for remediation, which is the most critical part of the work we're doing. Remediation is the process of implementing the recommendations of the NAITI audit reports. That is the much needed reforms that we require in our oil and gas and mining sector. So we're pushing for that, a clear provision on remediation to be put in the Act, so that all agencies that are responsible for implementing corrective measures will do so because the Act calls for it, and then the National Assembly will feel more strengthened also in enforcing the recommendations of the Act. In the process of implementation, we noticed some gaps that, if the gaps are remedied, will improve the implementation mandate that NAITI has. Some of these gaps have to do with the kind of sanctions that have been provided for in the Act. We are also proposing some new provisions relating to how NAITI is itself funded. We're looking at some improvements in how the governing board of NAITI is put together. There are quite a number of provisions that are targeted at strengthening the NAITI as an agency, strengthening its implementation mandate for continuous assurance of transparency and accountability in the oil and gas and the mining sectors in our country.
The Academic Staff Union of Polytechnics has threatened to embark on a nationwide strike over the non-payment of salaries by 6 states of the Federation. President of the union told journalists at the news conference in Abuja that 6 states, including Osun, Plateau and Benue State, are owing their Polytechnic lecturers between 8 and 10 months. Other states in the list include Abia, Imo and Oyo states. The union said it will mobilize members for a nationwide strike if the affected states refuse to remedy the situation.
In states like Osun, Plateau and Benue, the workers of the state-owned polytechnics are not only being owed between 8 to 10 months' salaries, but are subjected to slavish conditions of service. In other states like Imo, Abia and Oyo states, the situation is not only the same, as workers are owed up to 5 months in unpaid salaries without any plans by the state government to pay these outstanding salaries. We want to state without equivocation that it is morally reprehensible and desperately wicked for any government at any level to owe its workers 5, 6, 7, 8 months of salaries. Such a government has, by that very colossal failure, lost the moral claim to the leadership of its citizens. It has failed woefully in its mandate to provide governance and should immediately abdicate. If within the next few weeks, these state governments mentioned above do not hasten to clear the arrears of the salaries and allowances owed our members in full, our union nationwide will be left with no other option than to rise in arms in solidarity with our suffering colleagues. Candidates who sit for matriculation examinations into tertiary institutions deserve equal treatment. The situation where candidates sit for the same examination but are allocated discriminatory cutoff points into the universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education respectively shall no longer be acceptable by our union. Candidates seeking to be admitted into the polytechnics should be placed on the same benchmark as their other counterparts.
In the meantime, the face-off between the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities, SANU, with the authorities of the University of Lagos over unpaid allowances appears to be worsening. This is because members of the union have vowed to carry on with its protest until all payments are made. The gates of the university were locked for a few hours. A ploy, the union says, will continue. Our correspondent, Oreoluwa Shonibare, reports.
Traffic on this road leading to the University of Lagos in Nigeria's southwest is not a common sight. More unusual is the scanty road that leads to the institution. Something must have spurred this. Getting to the gates, we meet it on the locks. The only way in is through the pedestrian entrance. The siege is by members of the Senior Staff Union of Nigerian Universities, SANU. Even the rain does not deter them from the cause. Their grievance is aimed at the administration of the institution over unpaid earned allowances, which the chairman of the union in the university says must be paid as its members are facing hardship.
We have been engaging our management. We engage the council on it and all the rest of them, so that this thing will be paid. But we discovered that they have been trying to use some people to sabotage our effort. What is the problem with the face of Lagos? Have we committed any offense? The federal government is punishing us? Or somebody is being funny, collecting the money and not giving the money to workers? That is why people are saying this money must be paid, even today.
The gates are finally opened by the chairman, but with the reassurance of continuation until the demands are met. The University of Lagos is yet to make an official comment. But when it does, it will hopefully be one that brings this matter to a positive conclusion. Oreoluwa Shonibare, Channels Television News.
The International Fund for Agriculture Development, IFAD, says it is implementing a 7-year rural agriculture finance support program aimed at reducing poverty in at least 345,000 rural poor households in Nigeria. The program focuses mainly on women and the youth empowerment through job creation, cooperative lending and other sources that will make them financially stable and secure Nigeria's future. IFAD's country program manager, Atsuko Toda, who disclosed this at a meeting with the management of the Bank of Agriculture, the Central Bank of Nigeria and microfinance bank operators in Kaduna, northwest of Nigeria, say the program aims to tackle unemployment and poverty in Nigeria as well as encourage economic growth and development.
The challenges of poverty and rising cases of epidemics, especially amongst women in the rural communities across Nigeria, require even greater interventions by the international community to prevent a worsening situation that carries with it the seeds of social tension and unrest. Women in most rural communities in Nigeria continue to face discrimination in access to agricultural assets, education, health, employment and other services. Such obstacles prevent them from fully enjoying their fundamental rights and opportunities for growth. To address the many challenges that rural women face, IFAD and the Nigerian government are working to empower women through linkages to financial institutions in order for them to obtain credit to start up or expand their businesses. These trainings, amongst others, will focus on skill acquisition, business plans, financial literacy and new technologies.
I look forward to a strong and reliable partnership with the BOA going forward, because actually you are the bank that we need to work with in agriculture.
So far, the program has commenced in 12 states, namely Adamawa, Benue, Abia, Anambra, Edo, Katsina, Zamfara, Lagos, Imo, Nasarawa, Akwa Ibom, Bauchi and Oyo. The Executive Director of Finance and Wholesale of Bank of Agriculture, Babatunde Igun, says assessment of the loan is collateral-free and attracts only 2.5% interest rate.
There is no collateral. You know what I mean by collateral? They're not to bring houses or they're not to bring anything. We use peer pressure. And that is why we encourage them to be in group. This is a $27 million project. And
we are also having a contribution to it. And so far, BOA has committed about 162 million. And IFAD has spent almost about, when we convert to Naira, we are talking about 276 or thereabout million Naira.
After hours of deliberations, stakeholders at the event say the program has reasonably recorded some positive results.
We believe getting particularly the rural poor out of poverty is germane, is very, very important. Regardless of whatever policy government is doing, if the poor are getting poorer, it doesn't impact on them. But by the time they are financially included, very many of them will be lifted out of poverty. Experience has shown that people that have access to funds are usually come out of poverty very, 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 very well. So it is important that central bank stand behind it, and that's why CBN is part of this, and CBN is supporting IFAD in ensuring that the rural people out of poverty.
The International Fund for Agricultural Development in the last 15 years has committed over $100 million for rural agricultural development in Nigeria.
Well, time now for business news on the news at 10 with Ann Waudo in just a moment.
Hello, welcome to Business News. The central bank injected dollars into the market on Friday. That's after a slowdown in foreign exchange for a few days. According to analysts, this intervention is a move to ease the struggle for the greenback by importers following government's implementation of the Treasury single account. The central bank governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, on Thursday assured bankers that liquidity will be injected into the interbank market, which dried up this week. There were a few trades in the market. That's about 3 to 5 a day, down from 80 to 100 on an average. President Muhammadu Buhari had directed all government agencies to transfer their revenues from commercial lenders into the Treasury single account domiciled with the central bank, a policy that is expected to help plug leakages in government revenues. Well, analysts have, however, indicated that the policy could suck up 10% of the banking sector deposits. The central bank will convene its two-day monetary policy committee meeting on Monday, the 21st, through to Tuesday, the 22nd of September. The meeting will help decide on monetary policy setup in the near term, along with recent global development. Analysts at Access Bank are expecting the deliberations to dominate by weak domestic growth outlook, the creeping inflation and exchange rate uncertainties. According to the analysts, other predicted outcomes of the meeting include retaining the MPR at 13% while leaving the plus or minus 200 basis points corridor unchanged, a review of the cash reserve requirement downwards to 21%, and the retaining of liquidity ratio at 30% as some of the expectations from the outcome of the meeting by Tuesday. A former special advisor under the former President Goodluck Jonathan administration, Mr. Ahmed Gulak, is asking the federal government to reduce its stance on the implementation of the Treasury single account. According to Mr. Gulak, a thorough consideration of the activities of the ministries, the departments and the agencies of the Federation shows that the TSA enforcement cannot cut across board. He advises the President to adjust the policy in order to prevent job losses.
The single treasury account was started even by the immediate past regime, but it was not across board. There are some MDAs that need to operate that single treasury account. There are other MDAs that need daily funding for their services. And if we continue to employ that single treasury account across board, things will suffer, services will suffer. That is why banks are retrenching now. Banks are retrenching, companies are retrenching, people are being sent home. This is the impact of the STA that has been made to apply across board. It ought to have been separated from those that even if you do it, it will not affect job creation or job losses. Take, for instance, even in Lagos, when you embark on environmental cleaning, these laborers that you pay daily, you need funds to do that.
Well, that's our package on business news for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ann Umawadu. The rest of the news at 10 continues with Gimba.
And next on the news at 10, Victor Moses scores for West Ham. Odion notches up to brace for Watford as Arsenal, Manchester City suffer losses in the English Premier League. That's on Sports News. Join us again.